Supreme is a brand that started up in New York City in 1994, and now 28 years later is worth $5 billion. They did this through scarcity marketing, through collaborations, through the reselling market, and through adapting to evolving fashion tastes. But I wasn't necessarily as interested in how they took their brand from $10 million to $5 billion. I wanted to know how they took their brand from zero to their first million, to their first 5 million. This is that period in time that all of us clothing brands really struggle with. And so I did a ridiculously deep dive into their origin story and their first $1 million, not only to satisfy my own curiosity, but so that I could apply this to my own clothing brand and help other clothing brands learn from their story. And I've absolutely nailed it. And not only have I nailed it, but the truth behind the story is absolutely insane and more ridiculous than you could ever imagine. I hope that this helps you grow your clothing brand a lot better, and I hope that you enjoy. Apparel Success is sponsored by my buds over at Design Crowd. If you struggle with designs, I really recommend that you try them out. You post a project on Design Crowd. Amazing designers from all over the world are going to compete for your project. You choose the winner, then you get that design plus revisions. I've literally sold thousands of these designs on my website, and I got them all made through Design Crowd. If you're interested, head over to designcrowd.com/apparel to learn about the special offer that I have for you, or just use the discount code apparel when you post a project on Design Crowd. All right, so this story here is truly fascinating to dive into. Supreme started up in a little skateboard shop in New York City back in 1994. And obviously back then there was no such thing as social media. So skateboarding was basically becoming like a huge trend at right around this time in the mid 90s. And their shop basically became a place for skateboarders to go to and to hang out at. And the skateboard culture is kind of one that's a little bit rebellious. And their shop became a place where kids could go to kind of get away from their families. And everybody was kind of hanging out at the shop. They literally made it so that people could skateboard right into the shop itself and do some shopping and just like chill and hang out. And they were basically just like a regular skateboard shop when they first started. Nothing special about their brand, nothing truly different. So what drove me crazy was trying to understand what gave them that momentum, what gave them all of that power at the beginning to make all of these sales and really start rolling to become a $1 million, $5 million, $10 million brand. And through diving deep enough into this story, I discovered a concept known as the Yoyo Effect. If you can imagine back in elementary school when you were a kid, there are certain trends that pop up in the schoolyard. And most of these trends are set by kids that have the highest status amongst all the other kids in your school. And so the Yoyo Effect is basically if one of the sort of less popular kids, kind of like the nerdy guy who nobody likes, shows up to school with a yo-yo, he's kind of viewed as weird. Nobody really follows that trend and nobody really shows up to school the next day with a yo-yo. But if one of the really cool kids that everybody looks up to, one of the popular kids in school shows up to school that day with a yo-yo and nobody else in the school has a yo-yo, the next day, maybe 3 kids have a yo-yo. Then the next day after that, maybe 50 kids, then 100 kids. And then all of a sudden, the whole school is into yo-yoing and all of the neighboring schools are into yo-yoing. And this is how trends really happen. It's when the high status people support something and then all of the other people sort of go with the trend, they go with the flow. And just to illustrate this point even more, this is how Pokemon cards became a huge phenomenon in the world. Is basically a certain group of kids showed up and became interested in it, and it just spread like wildfire because it was the right kids who were interested in it, and everybody just wanted to hop on board and become a part of that trend. This yo-yo effect is exactly how Supreme got their initial momentum and took their brand to $1 million, $5 million, $10 million in sales. The right kids showed up at their skateboarding shop in New York City, the kids who were cool, the kids who had influence on all the other kids, and they showed interest in this brand Supreme first. And when they showed that interest, that's all that it took for all of the other kids to want to jump on board. And I know it sounds kind of weird calling certain kids high status and other kids low status, but this is actually what happens in a social setting at this age group. At any age group really, is certain people have the status in the group and they set the trends of what's cool. And that's how Supreme took off like wildfire. Now, what's truly genius about what Supreme did to take their brand to the next level is in combination with the natural spread of interest throughout the cool kids in this skateboarding community. What most brands would do if they started to get a lot of traction like this is they'd invest in more inventory to try and keep up with the demand. And the owners of Supreme were smart enough to know that they wanted to underproduce in terms of the inventory that they were coming out with, to make sure that even though there was a really high demand in the product, there wasn't enough product to go around. And this skyrocketed the value of the brand, and it held the brand's value really high. So the owner of Supreme had the discipline to leave money on the table when they could have produced enough inventory for all of the kids asking for it. They left the money on the table. They decided to underproduce on inventory to increase the demand, and that increase in demand absolutely skyrocketed the value of the brand. And it led to kids asking where and how they could get it. It spread word of mouth. It made the value of the products that the kids already had so much more valuable, and it just really instilled the value of the brand, and they've held that down ever since. So before we get into even more crazy stuff that Supreme's done to market their brand to $5 billion, that's how Supreme gained traction at the beginning. And this is the lesson that you need to take for your own brand, is that it really does matter the hands of the people that you get your clothing into and how you manage the perception of your brand through all these little details. And Supreme is a textbook example of how to do this. Okay, so from this place of gaining momentum on their own through traveling throughout the skateboarding community and the word of mouth spread, the way that they took their brand to a whole other planet is 8 years later, in 2002, Nike was trying to make a push into the skateboarding community. And Nike wanted to collaborate with the biggest skateboarding brands. And since Supreme had made such an impact on the skateboarding community, Supreme and Nike did a collaboration. And so that collaboration was absolutely massive. And around this time, Supreme started collaborating with everybody. They noticed that the kids who were showing up to their skateboarding shop were wearing high-end designer clothing like Gucci, and they were pairing it with like the street side of things. And so these high-end designer brands that wanted some more street credibility wanted to collaborate with Supreme, who had the street credibility, and Supreme wanted people to view their brand as premium, so they wanted to partner with the high-end designer brands, and they were a perfect collaboration there. Now, the reason why I didn't start this video with this info is because in order for you to do collaborations with these big brands, you already need to have really achieved something. How are you going to collaborate with Nike right now? Like if you're just a small brand getting started, you need to achieve something on your own first. And that's why I wanted to start this video out by explaining exactly how Supreme got off the ground and started to make their first $1 million or $5 million. Because once you gain that leverage, once you have that momentum, then you can start doing collaborations. You get your clothing brand worn by Kanye West, who wore one of their Supreme blazers 13 years later and took their brand to a whole other dimension. And just as a little side note here, I think it's important to note that 8 years in, they collaborated with Nike. 13 years in, they got worn by Kanye West. How long have you been running your clothing brand? Have you even launched yet? Like 13 years to gain that celebrity status. That's a long time to be developing everything and to be working on your brand. And now they're 28 years in. This is what happens when you really stick with a powerful idea and an idea that you believe in. And so a whole whackload of other celebrities started to endorse the brand. Tyler, the Creator, wore it in one of his music videos. And that's how the brand really became huge. Now, the next step to taking it to a $5 billion brand is that obviously their brand evolved through the era of social media. And one of the things that happened in the era of social media is the reselling market for clothing brands became absolutely massive. And Supreme is really at the top of the list for this. Let me lay this out for you. Since there is such a high demand for their products and such a low supply, people in the reselling market go crazy trying to get their hands on Supreme products. Because they underproduce, it's really scarce, so people are looking everywhere to try and get their hands on this product. Now, this acts in a symbiosis between people who are reselling to just literally do this as a business to try and make money. They get their hands on Supreme and they flip it and they literally make a living off of this. And people who are just die-hard brand lovers who are doing everything that they can to own Supreme for themselves. So those two live in complete symbiosis and work together absolutely perfectly, and that is what really took their brand to a whole other planet. So the reselling market is the reason why they became a $5 billion brand. The resellers are able to make money off of it and make a living off of reselling Supreme clothing to brand lovers, people who are die-hard fans of the brand. And in part, they're die-hard fans of the brand because there's a limited supply of products, and that acts in a full circle. This is what's known as self-fueling hype. and they've mastered this to a T, and it's what's allowed them to create this $5 billion brand over 28 years. What an absolutely insane journey, and I hope that there were incredible lessons that you could take out of that story and apply to your own clothing brand, and I really hope that you liked it. The Apparel Success Mastermind is available now. It's got all of my courses, a community of clothing brand owners all in there supporting each other, answering each other's questions. We hop on live streams together and just hang out and share everything to help our clothing brands grow. So if you're interested, you can learn more about what's inside at apparelsuccessmastermind.com. So if you're interested, now's the time to sign up, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.